The gunshot cracked through the sound of the torrential rain, and every guard on the perimeter flinched. Someone had stepped onto the west lawn, again, and when Benco Min-ho was on edge, trespassers didn't just get removed, they ceased to exist. Who authorized a delivery? The main hall went deathly still. Everyone knew that question wasn't an inquiry, it was an accusation. Slowly, the security team's eyes shifted to the monitors, to the soaking, wet woman standing fearlessly at the front gate, the only one foolish enough to bang on the solid oak doors, the only one who didn't know the law of this estate. Silence is survival. At this point, Happiness Jones realized one thing. This wasn't a normal priority order. This was a mistake that might cost her life. The rumors in the city were vague but terrifying. If you see the gates of the Min-ho estate, turn your scooter around. If you cross the threshold, you don't come back. But tonight the gates groaned open. "Bring her in," the voice commanded over the intercom. Cold, detached. Cold was worse than angry. Someone bypassed my security grid. Someone thought they could walk up to my fortress with a backpack and a smile. No one breathed as the front doors parted. "I'll ask once more." Benco stood in the entryway, his hand resting casually on his holster, but Happiness saw the tension in his jaw, the coiled violence of a predator whose territory had been breached. "Who sent you?" Silence. That night, amidst the marble and gold, with the storm raging behind her, Happiness found herself frozen. Benco stepped out of the shadows, his face illuminated by the crystal chandelier. He closed the distance in 2 strides. He didn't pull his weapon. Instead, he reached out, his fingers cool and firm. He tilted her chin upward, forcing him to look him in the eye. "Look at me. Welcome to Hidden Boss Chapter. Before we step into this high-stakes world of forbidden romance, storms, and dangerous secrets, I want to thank you for being here. Your time matters, and I'm honored you're spending it with me. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Your support keeps this channel alive. Now let's dive into a tale about a woman who just wanted a tip and a man who was ready to burn the world down." Happiness stumbled forward as he pulled her across the threshold. Her wet sneakers squeaked agonizingly loud against the pristine black marble floor. Every squelch felt like an insult to the elegance of the house. Even the dripping water from her poncho seemed like evidence of a crime. The estate had looked intimidating on her GPS, a massive, sprawling compound hidden in the hills. What the navigation app hadn't mentioned was the atmosphere, the unnatural, suffocating pressure that pressed against your chest until you felt the urge to apologize just for breathing. She'd noticed it the second the heavy doors closed behind her, the way the uniformed staff vanished into the alcoves, how they communicated with terrified glances at the floor, never daring to look at the man in the bespoke suit, how they flinched at the thunder, or perhaps at the sound of Benco's breathing. She remembered the dispatch notes on her phone screen: VIP client, high tip, discreet delivery. But discreet didn't cover the rules vibrating in the air here. Do not speak, do not look up, do not exist. But existing was the one thing Happiness couldn't help but do. Not with her bright utilitarian uniform, her silver insulated backpack that took up too much space, and her confusion that announced itself before she even spoke. She looked up at him, her dark braid dripping water onto his expensive rug. In a world of black suits and silent obedience, she was a chaotic splash of color and noise. And as Benco's dark eyes bored into hers, searching for a lie, she realized she had walked into a lion's den armed with nothing but lukewarm noodles and a receipt. The rain wasn't just falling, it was attacking. Happiness hunched over the handlebars of her battered scooter, the wind threatening to peel her off the wet asphalt. Seoul was usually a reliable grid of neon and logic, but tonight the storm had turned the city into a chaotic blur of gray and black. Her phone, clipped precariously to the dashboard, flickered. The GPS arrow spun erratically, mocking her. Recalculating. "Don't you dare," she muttered, wiping a sheet of water from her visor. "Not on a triple surge pricing order." She needed this bonus. The rent was late, her savings were non-existent, and the priority order status flashing on her screen promised enough cash to keep the lights on for another week. The destination pin hovered somewhere in the prestigious hills, a jagged climb away from the safety of the bustling streets below. As she turned onto the winding private road, the pavement smoothed out, changing from potholed city tar to expensive, seamless slate. Massive trees arched over the road, blocking out the sky and plunging her into near-total darkness. Warning signs flashed past in the weak beam of her headlight. Private property, authorized personnel only, lethal force authorized. Happiness didn't slow down. In her experience, the more aggressive the keep out signs, the bigger the tip. Rich people didn't want neighbors, they wanted swift service without eye contact. She assumed the signs were just distinct decorations for the wealthy, like gargoyles or heated driveways. She throttled the scooter up the final incline, the engine whining in protest. The gates loomed ahead, massive wrought iron beasts capped with spikes that pierced the low-hanging fog. Miraculously, they stood slightly ajar, the violent storm likely shorting the heavy electronic mechanism. She slipped the scooter through the gap without a second thought. The estate that revealed itself was less a house and more a fortress. Dark stone, towering pillars, and windows that looked like unblinking eyes. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the silhouette of figures pacing the upper balconies. Happiness didn't notice the guards. She didn't see the sudden stillness of the shadows in the garden, or the way the perimeter security cameras swiveled in unison to lock onto her license plate. She was too busy looking at her watch. 52 minutes. The spicy beef broth was guaranteed hot for 60. She killed the engine and kicked the kickstand down. The silence that followed was heavy, swallowing the sound of the rain. Unaware of the crosshairs likely tracking her movement from the roof, she swung the heavy, silver-insulated backpack off her shoulders. "Please don't be lukewarm," she whispered to the bag, ignoring the ominous feeling of being watched. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid of a one-star review. With a grunt of effort, she adjusted her soaking wet cap and marched toward the massive front doors, completely oblivious that she was walking into a kill zone. She didn't wait. She pounded on the mahogany with the urgency of a woman losing money by the second. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the cavernous silence of the estate. Too loud, too brazen. "Hello, delivery," she yelled, her voice cracking against the thunder. The response was instant and violent. The heavy door didn't just open, it was ripped inward. Before Happiness could blink, a hand, iron-hard and impossibly fast, snaked out of the gloom. It clamped around her wrist, the grip bruising, and yanked her across the threshold. She gasped, her feet leaving the ground as she was spun around and slammed back against the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of her, the gold-trimmed paneling biting into her shoulder. The world spun in a blur of crystal light and shadows. Instinctively, she brought her hands up, not to fight, but to protect the damp receipt clutched in her fist. "Who are you working for?" A voice growled in her ear, low and vibrating with lethal intent. Benco Min-ho pressed his forearm against her chest, pinning her in place. His other hand patted her down rapidly, efficiently, searching for a holster, a knife, a wire. He found nothing but the wet fabric of her beige polo and the crinkle of paper. Happiness couldn't breathe. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stared up, eyes wide, as the man stepped back slightly, his confusion momentarily overriding his training. He was terrifying. Beautiful, but terrifying. His black suit was impeccable, a sharp contrast to her dripping utilitarian uniform. His hair was slicked back, exposing a forehead creased with suspicion. "I said, who sent you?" he demanded, his voice rising. The app, she stammered, thrusting the crumpled paper toward him. It's a priority order. Spicy beef. Extra noodles. Benco froze. He looked at the receipt, then at the massive silver insulated backpack she was still wearing, and finally back to her face. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. He stepped closer, invading her space until she could smell the faint scent of sandalwood and gunpowder. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his right hand. Happiness flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, expecting a strike. Instead, warm fingers closed around her jaw. The touch was gentle, almost mocking in its delicacy compared to the violence of a moment ago. He tilted her face upward, forcing her to look at him. Happiness opened her eyes. She found herself locked in a gaze that felt heavy enough to crush her. He studied her profile, her dark-skinned slick with rain, the stray braids sticking to her neck, the diamond studs catching the chandelier's light. He was looking for fear. He found it. But underneath the trembling, he saw something else. The stubborn set of her jaw, the annoyance of a worker interrupted. His thumb brushed her chin, his dark eyes narrowing as if trying to solve a complex equation. "You knocked?" he whispered, the absurdity of the words settling between them like fog. "On my door to deliver soup?"
"Lies," Benco hissed, dropping his hand from her face. The moment of bewildered intimacy vanished, replaced instantly by cold, lethal efficiency. Before Happiness could protest, he spun her around, his hands deft and intrusive as he stripped the heavy silver backpack from her shoulders. "Hey, that's a deposit item," she yelped, reaching for the straps. "You can't just take that." Benco ignored her, tossing the bag to a silent guard who had materialized from the shadows like a wraith. "Scan it," he ordered, his eyes never leaving Happiness. "Check for listening devices, explosives, and chemical agents. Strip the lining." He snatched her phone from her hand next. The screen was still glowing with the delivery app interface. "Wait, I have other deliveries. My rating." "Your rating?" Benco's laugh was a dark, humorless sound that echoed off the marble. "You breach the perimeter of the most secure compound in Seoul during a code red, and you are worried about a star rating." He didn't wait for an answer. He gripped her arm, firmly but not bruising this time, and marched her down a hallway that seemed to stretch for miles. The walls were lined with silk, and the floors muffled their footsteps. It was a golden cage, and she was the dirty, soaking wet bird being shoved inside. He threw open a set of heavy double doors and pushed her into a room that was larger than her entire apartment. A 4-poster bed, velvet curtains, antique vases on pedestals. Happiness stumbled, catching her balance on a chaise lounge that probably cost more than her life. She spun around, panic finally giving way to the specific burning anger of the working-class inconvenience. "Look, mister, I don't know what kind of role-play billionaire weirdness this is, but I have a job. If I don't finish my shift, I don't get the bonus. If I don't get the bonus, I don't eat." Benco stood in the doorway, filling the frame. He looked at her like she was a puzzle piece that refused to fit. The rain was still dripping from his hair, running down the sharp line of his jaw. "You are a scout," he said, his voice flat, allowing no room for argument. "The naive act is good, impressive even, but no one gets past the gate unless I let them. Who sold you the codes?" "The gate was open," Happiness shouted, throwing her hands up. Water from her oversized sleeves splattered onto the pristine floor. "The GPS said turn left." Benco stared at her. He was waiting for the assassin to emerge, for the hidden blade to slide out, for the mask to slip. Instead, she just looked annoyed. "You ruined the noodles," she said, pointing a shaking finger past him toward the hallway where the guard was dismantling her bag. "The broth is definitely compromised now. The seal is broken. That comes out of my tips." Benco blinked, his stoic mask cracking slightly. "You are concerned about the broth."
I'm concerned about the deduction from my paycheck, she snapped, stepping closer to a man who could end her life with a snap of his fingers. She held out a hand, palm up, staring him dead in the eye. That order was 45,000 won, plus the delivery fee. You owe me. For the first time all night, Benco Min-ho looked completely off balance. He looked at her outstretched hand, then up to her defiant eyes, shocked by the sheer suicidal audacity of a woman demanding a refund from the devil.
The door didn't just lock, it sealed, the heavy bolts sliding home with a finality that echoed in Happiness's bones. The room was a museum of wealth, silk wallpaper, Ming vases, a ceiling that seemed miles away. But to Happiness, it was just a very expensive waiting room with terrible cell service. She paced, 10 steps to the window, 10 steps back. When a maid finally scurried in with a tray of tea and fresh clothes, the woman trembled so hard the china rattled. She kept her eyes glued to the floor, retreating as if Happiness were a radioactive isotope. "Hey, wait," Happiness tried, stepping forward. "Do you know when he's—" The maid flinched violently, bowing low. "Please, miss, do not speak to me. It is forbidden." She fled, shutting the door as if escaping a bomb site. Happiness stared at the wood, baffled. She wasn't a prisoner. She was a ghost story in the making. Everyone knew Benco Min-ho didn't take guests. If you were in this room, you were dead. You just hadn't stopped breathing yet. 5 floors down, in the cold blue light of the security hub, Benco Min-ho sat motionless. On the wall of monitors before him, the estate was a grid of potential threats. Sector 4, clear. Gate, secured. Guest room B, active. He leaned forward, his eyes tracking the anomaly on the screen. He had expected tears. He had expected her to search for a weapon, or perhaps steal the silver comb in the vanity. Most people, when trapped in the lion's den, either cowered or looted. Happiness did neither. On the screen, she was standing by the massive bay window. The storm was rattling the glass, a high-pitched whistling sound piercing the room. Benco watched her hand hover over the latch. "She's going to jump," he thought, his hand hovering over the intercom button. "Or signal someone." But she didn't open the window. She frowned at it. Benco zoomed the camera in. The brass latch was loose, vibrating with the wind, a minor imperfection in his perfect world. Happiness dug into her pocket, finding nothing. Her backpack was gone, then grabbed a teaspoon from the tea tray. With the focus of a surgeon, she jammed the handle into the screw head of the latch and twisted. Once, twice. She tested the handle. The rattling stopped. She nodded to herself, satisfied, and tossed the spoon back onto the tray before flopping onto the bed. Benco slowly took his hand off the intercom. He sat back in the darkness, the blue light reflecting in his stunned eyes. She hadn't tried to escape the cage. She had just performed maintenance on it. In a house built on fear and breakage, she was the first thing that had ever tried to fix something, and that terrified him more than any assassin ever could.
The dining room was a cavern of shadows and obsidian, long enough to land a small aircraft on. At the far end, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that wept with the storm's fury, sat Benco Min-ho. He looked like a king on a throne of solitude. His suit was immaculate, the fabric catching the dim light of the crystal chandelier. In front of him sat a meal fit for royalty: seared duck, truffle risotto, wine that cost more than Happiness's scooter. Happiness stood in the doorway, feeling the beige polyester of her work polo cling uncomfortably to her skin. She hadn't been allowed to change, only dried off. She felt like a smudge on a masterpiece, a glitch in his perfect high-definition world. "Sit," Benco commanded, not looking up from his wine glass. She hesitated, then marched to the chairs set to his right. It was too heavy, the velvet plush. A silent server appeared, placed a plate before her, and vanished into the darkness so quickly it was as if they had dematerialized. "Eat," he said. "I need to see if you have the manners of a spy or the appetite of a peasant." "I have the appetite of someone who hasn't eaten since lunch," Happiness retorted, picking up the heavy silver fork. She didn't wait for a toast. She didn't tremble. She ate with efficient, hungry focus, ignoring the way his dark eyes tracked the movement of her hand to her mouth. "You are comfortable," Benco observed, his voice cutting through the silence. It sounded like an accusation. "Most people cannot swallow when I am watching them. They choke on their fear." "I'm too tired to be scared, Mr. Min-ho," she said, swallowing a bite of risotto. "And this is really good. It would be a waste to choke on it." Benco set his glass down, the sound sharp against the stone table. "You mistake my hospitality for weakness. The people in this house serve me because they know I hold their lives in my hand. That is respect. That is order." Happiness paused, the fork hovering halfway to her mouth. She looked around the room, at the empty chairs, the terrified silence of the staff lurking in the periphery, the cold perfection of the marble floors that reflected nothing but darkness. "That's not respect," she said quietly. "That's just survival." Benco's eyes narrowed. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You mistake my hospitality for weakness. The people in this house serve me because they know I hold their lives in my hand. That is respect. That is order." Happiness paused, before covering halfway to her mouth. She looked around the room, at the empty chairs, the terrified silence of the staff lurking in the periphery, the cold perfection of the marble floors that reflected nothing but darkness. "That's not respect," she said quietly. "That's just survival." Benco's eyes narrowed. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. And what would a delivery girl know of the difference? She met his gaze, refusing to blink, refusing to let the weight of his empire crush her. "I know that when I go home to my tiny apartment, my neighbors wave at me because they like me, not because they're afraid I'll shoot them if they don't." She gestured to the vast, empty hall around them, the opulence that felt more like a mausoleum than a living space. "You have a castle, Mr. Min-ho, but you don't have a home. There's a difference." The fragile truce of dinner shattered with the screech of the dining hall doors. The chief of security marched in, his face grim, carrying the silver-insulated backpack like it was a severed head. He didn't speak. He simply placed a small, black plastic card on the table between them. It was embossed with a crimson serpent, the insignia of the Jung Syndicate, Benco's sworn enemies. "Found in the lining," the guard said, his hand hovering near his holster, stitched inside the thermal insulation. The air left the room. Benco didn't look at the card. He looked at Happiness. The curiosity in his eyes vanished, instantly replaced by a glacial, terrifying void. He had let his guard down. He had let a Trojan horse sit at his table and critique his home. "Stand up," he said. The command was soft, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. "I don't know what that is," Happiness stammered, staring at the card. "I've never seen that before. I swear, I just bought the bag secondhand off Marketplace." Benco moved faster than she could track. In a blur of motion, he was across the table. He kicked her chair back, the heavy wood skidding against the marble, and before she could draw a breath, the cold steel of a pistol was pressed against her forehead. "You are good," he whispered, his finger tightening on the trigger. The struggling worker act, the naive charm. It was perfect. "Who is your handler? Did they tell you I would hesitate because you have pretty eyes?" "I don't have a handler. I have a shift supervisor named Steve," Happiness yelled. Tears welled in her eyes, not the silent, trembling tears of a victim, but the hot, angry tears of someone who has had the worst day of their life. She didn't cower. She didn't beg for her life. She glared at him right down the barrel of the gun. "Think about it," she screamed, her voice cracking with frustration. "If I were a secret agent sent to infiltrate your fortress, why would I knock on the front door? Why would I bring the evidence in a bag that smells like pepperoni? Why would I demand a refund?"
Benco's hand didn't waver, but his eyes flickered. "You think I'm some mastermind?" she continued, wiping her nose furiously with her sleeve. "I can't even afford data roaming. I'm here because my GPS glitch was a cheap download. Shoot me if you want, but for God's sakes, use your brain. If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have argued about the tip." The silence that followed was deafening. The logic hung in the air. Absurd and undeniable. Spies didn't scream about tips. Assassins didn't cry out of sheer annoyance. Benco looked at the weeping, furious woman, then at the card on the table. It was too clean, too obvious. Slowly, agonizingly, he lowered the gun.
The gun was still warm in Benco's hand when the world ended. It didn't end with a bang, but with a click. The crystal chandelier above them flickered and died. The backup generators, usually instant and silent, failed to hum to life. The mansion plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. "Get down," Benco whispered, the command barely audible before the floor-to-ceiling windows exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the dining room like diamond shrapnel. Red laser sights cut through the gloom, dissecting the dust and rain. Benco didn't hesitate. He tackled Happiness, his heavy frame driving her into the cold marble floor behind the overturned mahogany table. "Stay here," he hissed, his voice devoid as earlier suspicion, replaced by the terrifying calm of a soldier. "Do not move. Do not breathe." He rolled away from her, firing into the darkness. The room erupted in a chaotic strobe light of muzzle flashes. Thwip, thwip. The suppressed shots were sickeningly quiet, punctuated only by the wet thud of bodies hitting the floor. Happiness pressed her face into the rug, her hands over her ears. She was a delivery driver. She dealt with traffic, bad tippers, and cold rain. She did not deal with war zones. But then she saw it. From her vantage point under the table, she saw a shadow detach itself from the chaos near the kitchen entrance. A mercenary, clad in tactical gear, was flanking Benco's position. Benco was focused on the 3 shooters by the window, reloading with practiced speed, unaware of the gun barrel raising toward his exposed back. Happiness didn't think. The adrenaline that had been fueling her anger suddenly curdled into pure, reckless instinct. She saw her silver delivery backpack lying on the floor where the chief of security had dropped it. It was heavy, the reinforced insulation thick and bulky. She scrambled forward, her sneakers slipping on the glass-strewn floor. She grabbed the straps of the bag. "Hey!" she screamed, her voice cracking, echoing weirdly in the gunfire. "Order up!" She swung the heavy bag with every ounce of hysterical strength she possessed. It sailed through the air, a silver missile in the darkness, and slammed into the flanking mercenary's head. The man stumbled, his aim jerking wide. His shot went wild, shattering a vase instead of Benco's skull. Benco spun around, his eyes wide with shock. He saw the mercenary, the bag, and Happiness standing exposed in the open. He fired twice. The mercenary dropped, but the mercenary's reflex shot had already flown. "Down!" Benco roared, lunging for her. He was too late. A stinging, white-hot line of fire whipped across Happiness's upper arm as a stray bullet grazed her. She cried out, collapsing not from the pain, but from the sudden, overwhelming realization of what she had just done. Benco was there in an instant, dragging her back behind the cover of a marble pillar. His hands, usually so steady, were shaking as he pressed them against her sleeve. "You foolish, idiot woman!" he breathed, his voice ragged. He looked at the blood seeping through her beige polo, then up at her face. For the first time, the monster of soul looked terrified. "Why didn't you run?"
The silence that followed the gunfire was heavier than the storm outside. It was a thick, ringing quiet, broken only by the distant wail of approaching sirens and the steady drip of rain through the shattered windows. Benco didn't speak. He didn't wait for the surviving guards to secure the perimeter. He scooped Happiness up into his arms, ignoring her weak protest that she could walk, and carried her through the debris of his ruined dining hall. He didn't stop until they were in the library, a fortress within a fortress behind heavy oak doors that he locked with a trembling hand. He set her down on the edge of a mahogany desk, sweeping aside millions of won worth in antique spill vases to make room. "Let me see," he commanded, his voice rough. He ripped the sleeve of her polo shirt, the uniform she had been so worried about damaging earlier. The fabric gave way with a sound that made Happiness flinch. The wound was a shallow graze, a jagged red line against her skin where the bullet had kissed her, but to Benco it looked like a canyon. "It's just a scratch," Happiness murmured, watching him work. She was shaking now, the adrenaline fading into a cold, shivering shock. Does this count as a workplace injury?" Benco didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He uncapped a bottle of antiseptic from a hidden wall safe, his movements precise, but frantic. He poured the liquid onto a sterile pad. "This will burn," he warned. "I can handle it," she said, lifting her chin. He pressed the pad to her arm. She hissed, biting her lip to keep from crying out. Benco's hand froze. He looked up, his eyes locking with hers. For a moment, the assassin, the boss, the monster, was gone. There was only a man, terrified by the fragility of the woman sitting in front of him. He finished wrapping the vase, his fingers lingering on her skin. The warmth of his hand seeped into her chill. He stood between her knees, so close she could smell the smoke and expensive cologne clinging to his suit, the air between them charged, electric and undeniable. Happiness found herself leaning in, drawn to the danger of him, the raw intensity of a man who had just killed for her. Benco leaned in too, his gaze dropped to her lips, his hand drifted up to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Then he saw it, a smear of her blood on his own cuff. The spell broke, the tenderness vanished from his eyes, replaced instantly by a wall of ice. He pulled back as if she had burned him, stepping away until there was a chasm of cold air between them. "Get out," he said. The words were flat, devoid of emotion. Happiness blinked, the rejection stinging more than the bullet wound. "What?" "My driver is waiting at the back exit. He will take you to your apartment. Your debt is paid. Do not come back." "You're kicking me out in the middle of a raid?" Benco turned his back to her, gripping the edge of the desk until his knuckles turned white. He couldn't look at her. If he looked at her, he would keep her, and if he kept her, she would die. "You do not belong here, Happiness," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like a prayer. "I cannot keep you. You are too bright for a world this dark."
The ride home was a blur of tinted windows and silent, stone-faced guards. When they dropped Happiness off at her apartment complex, it was like being ejected from a high-speed chase back into a silent, grainy movie. Her key turned in the lock of her peeling front door. The familiar smell of old ramen and damp plaster greeted her, a stark contrast to the sandalwood and ozone of Benco's mansion. She walked in, her shoulder throbbing under the professional bandage. "Normal," she whispered to the empty room. "Just go back to normal." But normal was gone. The next morning, her bank app pinged, balance updated. The number made her drop her phone. Her credit card debt, her student loans, her back rent, all of it vanished, replaced by a sum that could buy her building. The transaction memo read simply, "hazard pay." For 2 weeks, Happiness tried to forget. She took deliveries but avoided the hills. She rode her scooter through the rain, but every flash of lightning made her flinch, expecting gunfire. She found herself staring at the news, searching for headlines about a certain Korean businessman, about raids or fires or bodies. There was nothing. Benco Min-ho had erased himself from the world as efficiently as he had erased her from his life. Until Tuesday. She came home from a double shift, exhausted and aching, to find a package sitting outside her door. It was small, wrapped in matte black paper, identical to the invitations she had seen on Benco's desk that night. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She picked it up. It was heavy. Inside her apartment, she tore open the paper. There was no note, no card, just a sleek black smartphone. As her thumb brushed the screen, it lit up.
It rang instantly. The sound was sharp, piercing the quiet of her small room. Happiness stared at it. The caller ID was blocked. Her hand trembled as she slid the green icon across the glass. "Hello?" she whispered. "We know who you are," a voice distorted by digital static hissed. It wasn't Benco. It was cold, metallic, and devoid of humanity. "We know what you are to him." Happiness froze. "Who is this?" "Look outside, Miss Jones." She moved to her window, her breath catching in her throat. Down on the street, amidst the parked scooters and fading streetlights, a familiar black sedan was idling at the curb. The window was rolling down. Even from 3 stories up, she recognized the silhouette in the back seat, the sharp jawline, the intense, predatory stillness. Benco Min-ho was looking up at her window. "He thinks he can hide you," the voice on the phone continued, laughing softly, "but he just led us right to his weakness." The line went dead. Benco's car door opened.